Hey guys, Shane with Monkeying Around, and today, in kind of conjunction with some of the videos I've been putting out about places to go kayak camping in North Carolina and South Carolina, I've got Chris from Hook, Line, and Paddle. Chris is a couple years ago he did the entire Cape Fear River. He was approached by Our State Magazine and the Cape Fear River Keeper, and he was involved in the planning, the coordinating, the logistics, the outfitting, the whole deal. So we're going to spend some time this morning talking with Chris about how to set up a camping trip, a kayak camping trip that is that long, and then we're also going to talk about the Cape Fear River because he's done the whole thing. He's probably got a little bit of knowledge about the Cape Fear. So, Chris, jump on in here. Tell us about yourself.
Hey, everyone. Good to see you again, Shane. Yeah, so I'm Chris. I'm owner of Hook, Line, and Paddle in Wilmington, North Carolina. And, a few years ago, it's getting to be about 3 now, a good friend, Kemp Burdett's a good friend of mine who's a Cape Fear River keeper, and we've been, for about 3 or 4 years, hashing back and forth. We got to do the river. We got to paddle the whole river. And it was always something. It was, can we go in the spring? No, we're really busy at work. Let's go in the fall. Well, I'm finishing my master's degree, so we can't go this fall. And he called me just, about shy of 3 years ago and said, hey, let's do the Cape Fear River. Our State Magazine wants to do it. At that point, I can make it happen. So that kind of started the planning process. Right before Christmas, he talked to me about it, and then we kind of jumped in right after the New Year's of 2016. And after that, it was different. Doing the whole river, they had a time limit of we had to get it done in 8 days from basically the base of Jordan Lake all the way to Southport. And then if anyone's familiar with my area, the Cape Fear River in Wilmington, we're tidal at this point. So it's kind of weird. It's the one trip I've ever planned backwards because I had to account for our 7th day landing in Wilmington that we came into town on a falling tide. And then we had to work the trip backwards from there to kind of our start date. So a little bit of weird logistics there, but if we weren't dealing with any kind of tidal conditions, it would have been just how many miles we need to get a day to finish up in time.
Okay. Now the Cape Fear, why was it? Was it because Our State reached out to you to do the trip, or?
Well, I think it was the Cape Fear because Kemp's the river keeper, and it's kind of my home waters, and we kind of felt like him as the river keeper and it being my home waters that we really should do the whole thing. But that's kind of what got us interested in paddling the whole river. He's in charge of it all the way up. He just doesn't care for the Wilmington area. Any part of the Cape Fear River, that's his domain. That's where he plays. And I just thought it'd be cool to do the whole river. 1 in 5 North Carolinians get something from the Cape Fear River, and mostly drinking water. So our largest watershed, only river that truly opens up to a mouth into the Atlantic Ocean. So in the scheme of river basins in the state, it's kind of the biggest one that can have the most impact, both good and bad, for a majority of the state.
Now, you guys, you said earlier that you had an 8-day time limit. Why was there a time limit on it?
It had to do with the writer and photographer for Our State Magazine. It was once this project was through, they had to start the next project. So, they kind of said, do you think we can knock it out in about 8 days? And we did the math on it. Our shortest day was around 25 miles. Our longest day was 37. But we were able to figure it out and squeeze in those 8 days.
There you go. Okay. All right. Now, camping, that's kind of that's an issue I run into when I'm out trying to plan trips and that kind of thing. Is there any camping along the Cape Fear that you can actually, either private or public that you can camp on?
I would say public, and that's the hard thing. The majority of the Cape Fear is the banks it's private property. It's farmland or just family land. It comes right down to the river. So on the upper stretch, there was Raven Rock State Park. That didn't fit into our scheme because it was too short of a day on the water. Our next option on the river would be Carolina Beach State Park in Carolina Beach, which is just south of me in Wilmington. And again, that was our last day, so we just passed that on by. So camping on the Cape Fear is difficult. But again, we did it with the river keeper, and like I said, he's worked the breadth of the river for so many years that he made contacts with a lot of landowners that were trying to get things fixed, or he reported issues with the river to him, and he was able to kind of go back to those contacts and say, "This is what we're doing for our state magazine. Do we have permission to sleep on your property?" And of course, one gentleman said no, only because it was physically impossible to enter his property from the river because of the natural levee. Called his neighbor next piece of property down who had a dock. Within 45 minutes, we had permission to camp. So they were really open to it, and I think they were open to it for that larger scheme of that it was going to be an Our State magazine article and to highlight the river. And I think that's what got a lot of yeses out of people when we asked permission to camp.
So the only two viable options for camping really didn't fit into your logistics of making it down the river. One was
no, they didn't. And it was like I said, we had 8 days. And we had to get so many miles a day, so it really did kind of. Yeah, Raven Rock didn't help, and Carolina Beach didn't help either. So, but we were able to kind of pull it off. Especially through Kemp, having those contacts and kind of looking during the day, and like I said, kind of from the beginning when we had to deal with that falling tide on the 7th day coming into Wilmington, we looked back like, well, where should we end on day 6 so we can make it on day 7, which then became where can we end on day 5 to make it to where we can camp on day 6. And that was that kind of backwards planning of the trip. The first night we were able to stay in Lillington by Howard's barbecue. They have a little kayak livery paddle service up there for just kind of running down through some of the rapids and then getting picked up with their vans. And we just kind of assumed that was their property. Called them, it wasn't. It was the family that owned the barbecue restaurant. And again, within an hour or so, the family called us back. They said, "We'd love to have you stay on our property. No problem. Hope you guys have a great trip." Actually stayed open a little bit late for us just so we could have something other than camping food. We get to enjoy some barbecue that night.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, let me go down to like logistics and the planning and that kind of thing. You took, according to the article, you took a native 15-foot boat.
Yeah, we did the Ultimate FX15. We all use the same Ultimate FX15. We just converted them all to solos from their tandem.
Now, why that boat?
Well, I think canoeing it with 2 people per canoe, I don't think we would have covered the amount of ground that day. And that's a really good hybrid for that kind of canoe kayak option. 15 feet, gave us the length for speed so we can cover more ground with every stroke. So that, we had faster kayaks with a 500-pound capacity, with you sitting in it plus your gear. Again, it was kind of a no-brainer. It just ended up being the right boat for this trip. We had a little bit of rapids on the top end of the river. The Ultimate held them fine, went through them fine. Then once we got down about past Irwin, when the kind of rapids kind of petered out, there was some current moving with us, but it was not moving like it was where we started. So I wanted to make sure we had a kayak that on more still water, we could effectively cover ground with every stroke. Because like I said, we were averaging 25, 27 a day, except for that one crazy 37-mile day. So, it was kind of, can we be on the water by 8 and can we be off the water by around 5? My rule of thumb, because it drives me nuts, I refuse to set a tent up in the dark if I don't have to. Because you just start losing tent stakes and guy wires get mixed up. So that was kind of my protocol. Like, I want my tent up before sundown. And then, I don't mind cooking with a headlamp, but I wanted that tent up by sundown. And that was kind of my criteria for the trip.
Okay, because I have, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I put many a hammock or tent up in the dark, and no, it ain't
so much fun. So yeah, that was kind of, yeah, and we knew we had to be reasonable with the miles we were covering that day. Our big day we did, it was a little bit more logistic, like let's get up a little earlier. We're not cooking breakfast. We're just gonna snack on granola bars. Let's pre-make a PB&J before we go to bed, just so we could just kind of get up, break camp, get the boats in the water. And we left about 7 in the morning, and with having to portage around Lock One, we got to our campsite just after 7 p.m. that evening. So it was 12 days in the saddle. It was 12 hours in the saddle, start to finish, that 37-mile stretch we did. But again, that was a must because we had to set up for that next day leaving to catch that falling tide into downtown Wilmington.
Now, tell me about the locking dams, because I've never had to I've had to deal with dams and portage around those, but
yep.
What's the purpose of those? Why, who put them there? Tell me something about those.
Well, the purpose is a really corny joke. What does a fish say when it runs into a wall? Damn. But that's horrible, but we got to get that one out there.
There you go.
So they were more for commerce, for moving material up and down river, back when barge was mode of travel. Now, especially Lock One, above it is where New Hanover, Brunswick, and I believe parts of Pender County get their drinking water. So that's why the River Watch built that Rockweir Dam, that fish passage around Lock One. They just couldn't take the dam out because, our drinking water supply would have been sucking air. But each locking dam does have a boat ramp and does have a portage takeout above the dam. Like, you'll start seeing the signs, dam coming up, no, don't go past this point, and you'll see all the signs pointing you over for the portage, which on all of them were river right coming down river. They got a place to get out. They got a little dock you can pull your boats up on. And it was kind of serendipity on most of these. Like, we got to Lock 3, and it turned out that every time we had a portage was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon for some reason, and that's when we ate lunch because we figured we're getting out of the boats anyways, moving gear. We might as well eat lunch. And Lock 3 kind of has a picnic area. So we kind of got the gear to the picnic area, set it down. It was kind of about the halfway point for the portage. Made a sandwich. Saw a pickup truck pull in with a kayak out of the back, but kind of driving real slow, so the window come down. Heard a guy yell my name, walked down. It was a buddy of mine from the Fayetteville area that I fish with, who just dumb luck was meeting another guy there to do some fishing. So we unloaded his kayak. He helped us portage the rest of our gear over to the ramp. So that kind of sped that day up, which was nice because at that point, carrying your gear halfway and eating lunch, we really weren't in the mood to pick it back up again, but we got lucky on that one. Lock 2, got lucky that the lock keeper was there when we showed up. Told him we were doing, didn't take a whole lot of convincing. We got locked through, which I was really excited about. One, we didn't have to carry the gear, and two, I've never gone through a lock in a kayak. It's not that incredible. It was a very slow drain. We just kind of lowered and the doors open and we went out. I thought it'd be, water rushing all around in there and turbulent and just kind of different and fun. And it was just a bathtub draining. So if you've never locked through in a kayak, it's cool, but it's not a life-changing experience. And then Lock 1, again, we just had a portage. They did a lot of work at Lock 1 because the Cape Fear River Watch now has the old Lockmaster's house as an education center, and they were allowed with the Corps of Engineers to build some raised walkways kind of in the back swamp where they can actually take students in to show them like how the drinking water's pumped through and how the lock chambers work. So because of that, they had to cut a little bit of a gravel road down along the side of the lock chambers where they could, back work trucks down to offload equipment. So that was kind of a nice, easy portage because once you were right out there, you had this nice man-made kind of gravel, well-made gravel road that we could just walk our gear down. And at the end of it was a ramp. We just walked right down the ramp. So portage, we had a portage buckhorn. There was no way around that. That was just a given. We put in below Jordan. So I wouldn't call that a portage, our actual put in. We just, made sure we were below the dam we put in. That wasn't too bad. But yeah,
What?
If you're going to do a buckhorn's a no-brainer, you got to carry around it. There's no way around that. You just have to go up over the top of the dam down the other side.
What's your trick to portage? Just throw all the gear in the kayak and two of you carry the kayak down the way, or do you have a trick? Or
well, buckhorn, and I'm sure you've seen that dam before, being kind of steep. We just, since there was four of us, we just kind of piled all the gear up at the bottom of it, and we all kind of got so far up the dam and just kind of tossed our gear up, and then we just slid the dry bags down the other side. And then, yeah, it was just, one guy on the front of two kayaks grabbed the handles, another guy in the back grabbed the two handles, and we carried them. That was kind of the quick down and dirty. When I thought about packing for this trip, knowing we were going to have to portage, I kind of went on the thought process of just like an ultralight backpacker. If I can take a lighter stove, that's a couple ounces less. I was just trying to shave weight. I knew I had to carry this stuff 3-4 times around some things. So could I carry 50 pounds or was I going to end up carrying 70 pounds worth of gear? And so I kind of looked at like my packing list and how I kind of prepared myself personally for the 8 days was what's the lightest gear I can take? What's the least amount of gear I can take? Because I knew I was going to have to get around buckhorn and all 3 locks. We got lucky on 2 going through it, but we weren't counting on getting locked through. So in my mindset, I kind of went with that ultralight backpacker's mentality. Can I go from a 40 to a 30-pound pack? And that's kind of how I attacked it.
Well, now that kind of goes along with, I guess, Eric Torres in the chat, Eric Torres Kayak, and he's got a YouTube channel. And he's from down Fort Charlotte way, but he asked, what is your don't leave home, what's your American Express piece of gear that don't leave home without it?
Well, I want to say a good paddle or a good PFD because one, a good paddle pays for itself, and you should never be kayaking not wearing your life jacket. That's me now getting off my soapbox. You got to wear your life jacket. But if I had one kind of no-fail piece of gear, especially for this trip, I took my Immersion Research Arch Rival Wader pants and Zephyr top. With the trip being that first week in April, weather was not, it wasn't typical. I mean, we had 70-degree days. One morning we woke up, it was 30, so we kind of had to think about, fleece in the morning, sun comes out, we get moving. By the end of the day, we were down to shorts and T-shirts. Towards the end, getting to camp, by the time we got to camp, got the life jackets off, put the fleece on, set camp up in kind of shorts, that kind of thing, and then slowly started layering up as the sun went down and got darker and cooler. So, I mean, for this trip specifically, I think, yeah, my American Express card for this trip was that IR top and those IR bottoms because it was nice to put them on in the morning to keep warm and dry, and it wasn't this big production. It was time when it got warm enough that I could shed them off. So that's got to be my American Express card, at least for this trip. And I normally take my dry top with me a lot because it's just nice to throw on if the day gets cool, if the wind picks up. It's just a good piece of gear. Stuff in a small 10-liter dry bag, keep behind the seat. It's not in your way, and it's there when you need it.
Okay. Yeah, and see, I would say definitely paddle.
I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. Like, people kind of freak out like, oh, my God, it's a $300 paddle. Well, I have a $300 paddle I've had for over 10 years. So do the math on it. That paddle is really inexpensive. And I'm going to have it probably another 10 years. Just got to do a little maintenance on your gear. And back to the life jacket thing. I'm a huge fan of Astral. I mean, pretty much all my PFDs are Astral. They all fit me well. You might be a smaller guy. You might be a bigger guy. You might not be able to get an Astral to fit you properly. So look at Stolquist, MTI. There's a lot of great manufacturers out there. Don't buy the jacket because you think it's cool. Buy the jacket because it fits you properly. If it fits you properly, you're going to wear it all the time. It's not going to become uncomfortable and cumbersome and the thing you hate to bring with you.
Okay. Yeah, and see, I like Astral. I picked one up not too long ago, a couple years back. It was used. I got it with one of the kayaks I bought, and me and my wife fight over that all the time. she
Yeah,
decides.
no, they're a great fit, and they're a North Carolina company. They're based out of Asheville, which is another kind of cool thing.
Ah, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're based out of Asheville.
Okay. That's something new to me. All right, so I'm curious, real specific about food because
Food.
I'm tired of the dehydrated meals that are full of
Mhm.
sodium and full of preservatives and all that junk. Is that what you guys did? Or
We did a little bit. We each kind of carried a few. So the meal thing kind of ended up being what you want. You know, myself and the writer, Jeremy, um, aren't vegetarians. The river keeper, Kemp, is a vegetarian. And the photographer tries to be as vegetarian as he can be because his 12-year-old son decided to go vegetarian and kind of threw the gauntlet down. And his dad's like, all right, look, if my kid can do it, I can do it too. So we just decided, like, everybody just bring your own food. So I did carry like 2 or 3 Mountain House meals as like just a emergency backup, or if someone ran out of something, at least you can split one. Um, but I mostly did. I did a little ramen, again, light, easy, quick cooking. Um, Went to Trader Joe's and got some of their what were they called? They were like beans and stuff. They were like black beans or pintos, or they had like kind of like a jambalaya thing that was kind of open the bag up, pour it in a pot, warm it up, kind of a one serving thing. What I found I did was I just put the whole metal packet in some boiling water, warmed it up, cut the top off, and ate it out of that. And they were pretty good. 3 years from now, I mean, trying to remember what they were called, but they were pretty decent. Pretty much every morning was oatmeal. We all just had oatmeal in the morning. Um, the photographer had some room in his boat, and he brought one of the old school 2-burner Coleman stoves, and the little like small table that you can pop it up on. So every morning we get, we all broke out our camp pot, got some water in it, and just they went on the burners as they came to boil. We just started making oatmeal. Then they were refilled and put back on again. Usually, I took an alcohol stove with a Caldera cone, again, just to be light. So while oatmeal water was being made, I fired my alcohol stove up to get water going, and brought one of those GSI French presses and started making the coffee. So and we all kind of worked together because we had to get. I mean, 4 guys had to pack their gear, pack their boats, eat, and get paddling. So we all just kind of pitched in and just kind of worked together to get kind of everybody's gear done, get breakfast made, eat, clean up, and get on the river.
okay, all right. I'm answering some questions here in the chat, and McAllister asked what kind of Astro I have, and it's an older one. They don't make it anymore, and I'm trying to think. I'll find out. I can't remember the model of it. The one that I'm looking at, I'm gonna get this year for my trips, is the Ronnie. I really like the Astro Ronnie because it gives me pockets up front, so that way I can take a little small, like Plano box or something like that, and stuff some stuff in it for my cameras and my batteries and that kind of thing. So the Astro that I got, I'm fixing to upgrade and pick up the Ronnie. So go look.
The Ronnie's a great coat. I use the Ronnie Fisher. Same platform as what you're looking at with the Ronnie, just different pocket configurations for more tackled storage. The jacket I wore on the trip and what I normally wear on eco tours is the Astral Green, just because there's a tow harness built into it. So if I have a customer that can't quite make it back in the tide, I have a way to hook up their kayak to help them along. And my just kind of going out cruising jacket, I really like the V8, especially here in the summertime with its full open mesh back and then the breathability of the front of it. That's kind of my going out in the summertime for just a paddle. I usually tend to grab my V8 because it's the most breathable one of them all.
Now the V8 is the Flying Fish Texan just asked the question. A high back PFD.
It is. So if you have a breathable seat, that mesh back breathes through the seat. You don't have any material blocking the breathability of your seat. Yes, yeah, the V8 is the high back one.
All right, so fly fishing Texan, go check out the Astral V8. That would be a good one for your for the back of your seat there.
Yep. The only thing, and like, for you with what you're doing on the water, video and stuff like that, the Ronnie's a smarter choice because the pockets in the V8 are not as big as the ones you get in that Ronnie. I mean, so the extra gear you're carrying for video and all that. Yeah, the Ronnie's a good coat for what you're looking for upgrading to.
All right, so Turtlehead Boys. Now, the Turtlehead Boys just asked a question, and this is a guy, I met him. I did a charity event not too long ago, back in the summer of last year, for a guy, and I met Josh, who's part of the Turtlehead Boys, at this charity event, and he's the one that ended up hooking me up with Chris to do this video. But Chris, he asked, what wildlife did you run into closer to Wilmington? Any gators?
Yeah, we started to see. Well, we saw our first gator just around the backside of Sutton Lake, where the power plant is. Probably a few miles prior to that, you could just start to see some slides in the grass coming down. But we really saw our first one swimming just outside of downtown Wilmington. They weren't really a concern. I mean, they're not even really a concern when you're paddling. I mean, if you think about, if I'm in a 15-foot ultimate and there's an 8-foot gator, he just knows I'm bigger than he is. Give them a little bit of space, they swim away or they go down, they'll hold their breath and go underwater as their, mode of defense. So, but yeah, we kind of started seeing sign maybe 3 or 4 miles prior to getting to the backside of Sutton Lake. Saw our first one swimming around Sutton Lake, in the river. And then, once you get through downtown Wilmington, heading towards like Carolina Beach State Park and further on down to Southport, you'll see more of them. But there's a few golf courses that the creeks that come off the river kind of end up back in some golf courses. So there's some easy habitat for them to, don't have to work too hard where we are to get a meal and hang out and just be lazy alligators.
All right. Now, what was your what was your most favorite? What was your favorite section of the river?
I want to say the upper portion. Well, the upper portion, because I'd never paddled it before. I mean, it was, when I'm on the Cape Fear River here in Wilmington, it's very static. It's dredge islands, it's marsh grass, it's cypress trees. It's kind of the same thing no matter where I go, whether I put in downtown or, up a little bit past above downtown or in the Northeast Cape Fear. It all kind of looks the same. But to be able to kind of go to the headwaters of the river and experience that, I think that was my favorite part of the river, because knowing I was on the Cape Fear and not looking like the Cape Fear I was used to, and kind of being virgin water for me, that was really exciting. So I think that was my favorite part of the trip. I mean, I still love paddling around here. Yesterday morning I took my 10-year-old out in her little Prodigy Extra Small, and we paddled for a couple hours. Just kind of hit a couple little islands off one of our local accesses on the river. It's still home waters. I still love the lower part of the Cape Fear, but I think for my favorite, it was the upper sections, those first 2 or 3 days, kind of running down through some of those rapids, different flora, different fauna. I think that whole trip we counted something like 36 bald eagles. It was like nightly, we just heard barred owls. That was just a nightly occurrence. By the time we settled in next to the campfires, who cooks for you? And it'd go on for a couple hours. So it was fun. I mean, the upper reaches for sure my favorite. And I think so just because it was so different and what I wasn't used to paddling. But equally as beautiful. I mean, it's kind of a night and day river when you start, get up there around Pittsburgh looking at what the Cape Fear looks like. And then you come down to Wilmington and look what it looks like. It's almost two different. It is two different things.
All right, let me talk about some of your gear and what you took, because 200 miles, 8 days on the river. I mean, you're talking a lot of water, a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get down south of the river, you're starting to get salt water coming into your fresh. So how did you plan for that? And did you filter water? Did you pack water?
Both. So on the upper stretch, Andrew, our photographer, used this opportunity to go out and get a gravity filter that he always wanted for the trip. I guess that's how he sold it to his wife. So we gravity filtered our water at night. We all brought a couple of empty water bottles. For food storage on the way down, I froze my regular, just store bought, like Aquafina type water bottles. And I did that for two reasons. I knew I wanted ice, or a cold cooler. So once we filled the bottles up at night, I could throw them in my little soft cooler, and those frozen water bottles would cool that water. And by the time it came to, having to where I couldn't filter water, I knew I had pretty cold, already now defrosted water bottles. So they kind of played a double role. They kept the water cold. They cooled the water that we filtered. They kept the cooler cold for the food that was in it. And then when we couldn't filter any water anymore, I had fresh water to drink. And so we just kind of, I think I bought one of those 48-pack cases. I froze it. I think we just split up between the four of us, in our small separate coolers, and use that as that theory of, keep your stuff cold, it'll keep your water cold, and eventually when we need to drink, it'll be defrosted and cold. So that's how we tackled the water issue. Gear wise, so not being on parts of the river and just kind of going by like Google Maps, Google Earth, and just kind of planning our trip out like that for some aerial footage. I took a one-man bivvy with a homemade 8x10 silt nylon tarp. I think I got the materials from Ripstop on the Roll. This guy Kyle up in Raleigh. He's got a lot of, if anybody's into like DIY, making your own camping gear, Kyle just over the years has just piled on a ton of cool equipment, a ton of cool offerings and different materials, and did a OR helium bivvy. And I also brought a homemade hammock, underquilt, and top quilt. So I think I was about 50-50 between hanging in my hammock sleeping or ground sleeping. One place we stayed was kind of a sandbar, and there were a lot of small trees around, but nothing enough to hold me up sleeping. So I ended up ground camping that night. We ground camped when we stayed at the barbecue restaurant our first night, but a few other like guys that had property that was cleared out. It was easy to find two trees that were long enough to, put some straps up and hang. So that, I prefer to hang than ground camp. So I overbrought my sleeping equipment, but I did kind of use my top quilt for my hammock as my sleeping bag if I went to the ground. So I didn't bring two different sleeping bags. Like I talked about before, my stove was a Caldera cone with an alcohol stove. It was the tin can, beer can alcohol stoves. Dry gear, I touched on my IR top and bottom. I brought two pairs of Astral shoes with me. I paddled in my Astral Porters, and then when we got to camp, I just wanted to dry my, just get out of wet shoes, wet feet, put on socks. I brought my Astral Brewers as my kind of around camp shoe, just to be able to dry my feet off, put on some warm socks, and put on a dry, clean pair of shoes. So I brought an extra pair of shoes for that. I think one of the photos in the article as my shoes and Kemp's shoes all like wet and muddy in front of a fire pit, kind of trying to dry them off for the next day. We were kind of wet footed the whole time. So it was nice to have a just nice, clean, dry pair of shoes to put on. If I was on the ground, I had a light Thermarest inflatable mat. I think they're Trail or Trekker. They're real kind of thin contoured one. Again, I was looking for, saving space, saving weight. It's the same one I carry when I hike. So it's about it's the lightest one. It's the lightest one I'm willing to pay money for. Let's put it that way. You think of anything I might have missed? Kind of going through it in my head, a checklist.
Well, you got my next question, which is always a big debate from anybody that camps. Do you hammock or do you tent? And you got that. One thing that kind of particular, another favorite for me is I'm looking this year at trying to upgrade a little bit about how I stay powered up, how I stay charged up on the river between cameras and phones and all that good stuff. Yep. How did you guys, especially, I mean, you've got your photographer, he's got high-end expensive cameras and stuff. How did you guys stay charged up 8 days on the river?
So he used the Goal Zero Yeti, and he also had a solar panel for it. But I guess I'm not super familiar with Goal Zero, but from what he was telling me, that Yeti, that battery, kind of backup battery bank that they make, you can actually physically like 110 outlet charge it, at the house. And so he used that to power his gear. And during the day, he'd plug in his solar panel to kind of top it off. Luckily the first night staying at the barbecue restaurant, Howard's Barbecue, we stayed in their little gazebo where they have bands playing in the summertime, which was powered. So we were able to kind of plug all our stuff in. They turned the breaker box on for us down there. So we were able to charge up there. But basically, it was a big deal for Andrew because he was the one with like 3 different Nikon bodies. I mean, I do a little bit of photography, but I have never seen that many lenses. I didn't know they existed. He had gear on top of gear. So that Yeti really worked for him, doing his batteries. Myself, a friend of mine that's a sales rep, was talking to some guys. They're a British company called Power Monkey. And years ago, they'd given him some to pass out to, hikers, paddlers, just to do some gear review on, get back to them on. So I still have that. And that basically kind of in the theory of a Yeti, the Goal Zero Yeti, but much smaller. It's probably the size of a brick, for a laptop brick, for the power conversion. When you open the hard shell case up, there's a little solar panel that's inside there. And again, it's one of those things that you can power up from at your house, plug into the wall. So I did that, made sure it was full. When we knew we weren't in kind of low cell service where the phones were going to be working real hard, we flip into airplane mode so we could still take a bunch of pictures on the trip. And then we got close to the place when the cell service was going to be a little bit better. We take it off airplane mode and text all the pictures out to everybody, or just get in contact, tell people we're safe. So for me, that Power Monkey worked really well, but I was not like you. I wasn't dealing with a bunch of like GoPro cameras and batteries. So maybe one of those, like those Goal Zeros, might be the way for you to go. But for me, that Power Monkey was perfect. And I got lucky because the one I got given was like the international model. So I can go anywhere in the world. I got a plug for it if I ever want to power it up from a wall outlet.
Okay. All right. Now let me go back because you were talking about freezing water and putting it in your cooler.
Yep.
What cooler did you use? Because I just picked up an Ice Mule.
I used dry cases, 40. It's a 40-liter soft side cooler. So in the thought of what Yeti's doing with their soft sides, but they're bringing their coolers in at about $199 instead of $399. But it's kind of cool because it has backpack straps on it. So for portaging, all my food just went on my back, and I picked some dry bags up and rolled. So I used that, and honestly, it was just coming out, and they let me take one of the prototypes, the one that was kind of like, all right, fit and finish. This is the way they're all going to look when we produce them. And being a prototype, or kind of that final version of it, worked great. I mean, it was so popular. Like, they were so on board with this thing that my sales rep met me when I got back to Wilmington from Southport, because it then had to be cleaned and shipped to Budweiser, because they were going to do a Bud Light Bud Light was going to do a version of it. They just put their logo on it to give it away at events, or for raffle prizes for people that go to like different events. So it's a great cooler for $200 for 40 liters. And if it's not completely full, being somewhat soft-sided, I was able to kind of squeeze it and form it and put it where I needed it. So I had it right behind my seat. So if I needed something to drink, all I do is put my hand behind me and get it right out of the cooler.
And that cooler was the what?
Dry case. Dry case is 40-liter cooler. They do a lot with phone protection, and they have a medical side of their company where they'll do for casts. I think that side of the company is called Dry Core, but they're a Wilmington company. They're right down the street. And it's a great little cooler.
What is is there any gear that I haven't kind of touched on that you can think of?
Not really.
You making food and water cooler.
Well, I think food, you're going to bring what you want to eat, but you got to think about it. It's got to fit, and do you have enough room to take however many days you're going on? That's kind of why sometimes those freeze dried meals are kind of no brainers. I mean, they get kind of old, but they are kind of a no brainer. You open it up, pour in 2 cups of boiling water, seal it, come back 15 minutes later, and you got chicken a la king. It gets kind of old 3-4 days in a row, but it's easy. I think where I'm at coastally, if I'm doing like an overnight or something like that on one of the islands when I really am in salt water, I feel better if I come back still having water. It means I overpack. Because if you can't make fresh water, you should really have a lot of it with you. I think the way I keep my stuff organized, like just over the years, I purposely bought dry bags in different colors. So I know red's kitchen, purples, backpack or sleeping bag or tent, So when you're looking at that loaded kayak and it's time for lunch, you can look down and be like, oh, well, red one's got the food in it. I've kind of color coded my dry bags to, each color means something to me. So it's easier so I can just reach in and grab what I want and put it back again. But I mean, that's 25 years of buying dry bags. So just slowly over the time, I just started picking different color. When I needed a new dry bag, I just made sure I bought a different color. So I can kind of coordinate it in my head.
What's your dry bag that you use? What's your favorite?
I got kind of a mixed bag. I have some from NRS. I have some from Dry Case. I have some from Sea Line. I think NRS's new Mighty Light dry bag. It's that sil nylon impregnated stuff. They're pretty sweet. They're real pliable. I didn't have any issues with them on the river trip. I think I took 2 or 3 of them with me that way. And another reason why I like them, I have a couple 5 and 10 liter ones because they are kind of soft and pliable. They're good for waterproof and stuff when I go hiking also, that if I want to just make sure, like, all right, my backpack will probably keep the stuff pretty dry, but this thing can't get wet no matter what. And so I like their Mighty Lights for that. So yeah, but mostly just over the years of paddling, I kind of have a mixed bag of manufacturers, but NRS, Seal Line, Dry Case, any good dry bag is going to do for you. Anybody, from a good outdoor retailer, any dry bag they're selling. I don't know if I trust like one of the Ozark ones, from some of the big box stores. But if it's a name brand and you're interested in getting one or you already have one, I think you're going to have a decent dry bag for sure.
Okay. Is there any plans between, I guess, the Cape Fear Keeper on trying to make the river more camping friendly so it would be easier for folks to do this particular trip?
I mean, I know we've talked about it, and I think it's a viable thing, and I think it's gonna take a village, though. It's gonna take the state reaching out to some large landowners saying, hey, can you put a couple acres in a conservation easement, for camping? Can we get people in that area willing to volunteer to maintain those campsites? Because I would think if I was going to volunteer, an acre on the river to allow people to camp on it, I'm not going to go down and clean it up. I'm letting you use my property, no problem. You can use this little section of the river. You won't be trespassing. Just try to keep it neat. And if we can kind of work out something like like the Appalachian Trail Club or Sierra Club, where they adopt a section of trail and maintain it. And if we can get groups together that are willing to adopt a site or a campsite or two along the river to go down maybe every Saturday afternoon, have permission, right away permission to drive down to that campsite, make sure there's no trash laying around. If there is, give it a little bit of a cleanup, make sure everything's in good order, and then head out. I think it's a viable thing. I just think it's going to take a village. It's not going to be one person. It's not going to be a group of people. But I think if enough like-minded people get together, for agriculture land, maybe a handful of those acres aren't producing because when the river floods, it's just lost land to them. But if they could put it in some kind of a conservation easement and get some kind of a tax break or tax credit on it, now that property is starting to do something for that farm again. They have the ability to, recoup some income on their taxes and go from there. But I do think it can't be just 3 or 4 guys driving up and down the river every Saturday, because it's going to get old. Because if you're the one that always does it, you're eventually going to start blowing it off. But if we can get enough people together, now there's enough paddle community in the state that not per se enjoy the Cape Fear River, but enjoy sections of it, and they like to enjoy more of it. I think some of the trips I did, some of the mileage we covered in those times, on that trip, the average person may not want to do. I knew if I took my daughter, which she was 7 at the time, she would have never made our shortest day of 24 miles sitting in a kayak. She just would have lost her mind. It's like a long car trip with her in the back seat. It just doesn't work. But if we can get these places 10 to 12, no more than 15 miles apart, then you can go out there and enjoy it with your kids. Take a canoe, take a couple small kayaks, just drift along, enjoy the river, camp, either leave from that side or drift down to the next. There are plenty of public access along the river where you could work out, we'll put in here and we'll sleep here tonight, and then we're going to come pick us up at this boat ramp tomorrow. That's a viable option too. It's just getting some of that private land granted permission to sleep on. And if we can get that to happen, it'd be an incredible blue way. They did really good work with that kind of stuff on the French Broad in the mountains, between the French Broad River Keeper and a private camping company, kind of a private management company, where some of their spots are pay to camp and some are free, just depending on which ones are available. I know there's portions of the New River, the Neuse River, that have some camping set aside. The lower part of the Roanoke, with the Friends of the Roanoke, they have platform-style campsites that you just reserve. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We just need to get some of that private property granted to public use and get a good core of folks to maintain it and just be stewards of it. Volunteer a little bit of your time. And I always thought, I've talked this about people like, well, you get someone's going down to pick someone's trash up. And I don't think so. I think the caliber of people that are willing to spend 30, 45 miles on a river and some kind of canoe or kayak aren't the guys that are going to leave a half a case of empty Busch Light cans in the woods and a half doused fire before they hop in the boat and paddle on. I think the quality of people that are going to be doing these kind of trips are definitely, conservation minded. They're going to pick up all the trash. They're going to probably do a little bit of campsite improvement while they're there too, just to make it better for the next person. So I think all the arguments of like, oh, it's going to be a lot of work and there'll be trash everywhere. I think once you realize the people that are going to be actually accessing and using it, that doesn't become an issue.
And see, that I was thinking about the platforms on the Roanoke. Would that be a viable option to have the platforms going down the way? And again, you're right. I mean,
yeah, well, at that point, now we got to figure out if the state had that kind of money to build those platforms for us. When you can ask a landowner to, just allow a little bit of camping on his property, section it off, post a sign up, this is where you can camp, and go from there. That's probably the faster and less expensive option. But platforms would be perfect too. I mean, if it's navigable waterway, you can't own bottom, just build a platform, make it a camp spot.
And see, I wouldn't mind even paying if they said, hey, it's $10
No,
to
I mean, if we'd have gone and camped at Raven Rock State Park, we would have had to pay a fee to camp there, and I don't have a problem with that either because it's got to get built and it's got to be maintained. The money's going to come from somewhere. So I wouldn't have a problem reserving a $15-20 a night fee on those platforms because that would probably be enough money and enough people using it to pay for maintenance and upkeep.
maybe that's something. Maybe that's something for the future. Something to think about.
Yeah.
How we make that.
Like I said, if we can all kind of team up and work together on it, I think we can make it happen. If everybody pitches in, if you think about, from Pittsburgh through Chapel Hill down through, all these areas, you even in some of the smaller communities, you get around Elizabethtown, they have a huge boat ramp because a lot of people in the Elizabethtown area are on the river using it, for fishing, hunting, or just going out recreating. So there, I think every major town along the Cape Fear River has people that access it and use it. If you just drive it and see some of these just gigantic boat ramps just for the river, it's being heavily used because the state wouldn't have built that big of a ramp if people weren't accessing it. And so again, there's your like-minded people who care and enjoy the river that could possibly step up and be like, yeah, we'll do a Friends of the Cape Fear and we'll be happy to maintain campsite number 14 and we'll go in every couple of weeks and make sure the trash is picked up and it's looking good for everybody. I think the community's there. I think just getting some local farmers to maybe give an acre up would be the next step.
I love it. How do you pull it off? Who do we talk to?
I don't know. I mean,
keeper, camp.
Probably need to start with the river keep, and we probably need to figure out where in the NC park system, and then go from there, and then state representatives from those counties, and then to reach out to some of those landowners, and go from there. But again, the state's going to be willing to take a little bit of hit on the tax money, also on that property, if they're willing to put in some kind of a conservation easement or something like that for, or like a public trust type of thing. So I don't know. It wouldn't be something we can knock out in a week. We'd have to start kind of getting the right people talking to the right people, or most likely with the state, you talk to the wrong person, they tell you the right person to talk to. So you have the conversation twice.
Yeah. The new rivers like that up around Jefferson into Virginia. There's about a 30-mile section, and it's maintained by the New River State Park. And
there's 2 sections of camp, isn't there?
There's
2 campsites on that river.
No, there's tons. There you've got Wagoneer access, 221 access, River Bend, and Allegheny. There's 4 campsites, and then you have 1 or 2, maybe even 3. You have 3 that are private campgrounds that offer camping as well, and then you got a half a dozen outfitters. So if you're looking,
I've done West Jefferson from West Jefferson Outfitters 3 days upriver. Did the 2 state parks, and about lunchtime back at the outfitter. I've done that portion of that river. Trip.
See, that's for a camper. That's a real friendly river because you have so much. There's so many accesses. There's so many campsites, and there's so many outfitters. And folks using that.
I think a good way to touch on, like, kind of expand from that. I mean, if there are people like watching now live or are going to come back and rewatch this down the road, I think, if this is new to you, if you have those places like Shane was talking about, like in that area on the New River or a river near you, it doesn't have to be here in North Carolina, that you can put in and go a couple miles, be at a good, safe campsite, and get up the next day and go another couple miles and be done. Or if you have just a simple island you could paddle over to, if this is kind of new to you, and you're unsure about your equipment or what to take or what not to take, maybe before you plan a big 4 or 5 day trip, go do an overnighter, just kind of a shakedown cruise. Like, wow, this sleeping bag wasn't warm enough, or what, this tent was way too big. We didn't need all this room, or I brought way too much food, or this stove took up way too much space, and kind of you like look before you go out and spend a bunch of money. Look at the equipment you already have. Can you make some of that equipment work? If you're already a hiker, then you already have a tent, you already have a sleeping bag, you already have some way to cook food. So you may be able to borrow a canoe from a friend, or but bare bones, you're probably just going to go get yourself a life jacket and a paddle, and go from there. So, I mean, I wouldn't suggest, like, for someone watching this is like that wants to get into kayak or canoe camping, or multi-day trips. Just don't find a section of river you can camp 3 or 4 days, throw all your crap in the boat, and go. I mean, go Saturday afternoon after you get the yard work done. Grab the family, go paddle out to a local island, or a short trip, set up camp, and kind of take note and just what works, what didn't. Was it too much? Was it not enough? Was it too hot? Was it too cold? And then plan it from there, because if you do that first long trip and it's just miserable, you're probably not going to do it again, but you're probably missing a really good time, just not kind of working the bugs out on the front end of it. Just a simple overnighter. Like I said before, I made my own hammock, top quilt and underquilt. I did it the year before we did this trip. I made it. And a friend of mine got into making gear too, and went to his house. We basically made the same thing. He made his a little longer because he was a little bit taller than me, but basically we made the same thing. And went to Carolina Beach State Park on a Saturday afternoon. We knew it was going to be 25 degrees that night, because what we made should have taken us to around 0. Checked in, no one was in the group campsite. We took it, paid our $20. We hiked in, we set up camp, we slept. Worst case scenario, if we woke up in the middle of the night and the gear wasn't working like it was supposed to, we were a 1 mile walk back to a truck that we could turn the heat on and wait until the gates open in the morning. So we purposely did that. We handmade some camping equipment that should take us to 0 degrees, and purposely went to a local state park and used it on a really cold night just to make sure it was going to work. So we didn't find out halfway up Grandfather Mountain that it wasn't a 25-degree bag. We were freezing our butts off, and we were 4 or 5 miles from the car. There was nothing we could do but be miserable all night. So again, just if you're watching this video and you're either doing it or you're interested in getting into it, you probably have most of the gear you need. Go out and just go take it on a shakedown cruise. Just do a simple overnight somewhere and just make sure it does what you want it to do before you go out and spend a bunch of crazy money on new tents and new bags. And $2,500 later at REI, you've loaded up, and you're the king of glamping when you probably have the right equipment. You just need to figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work for you on the water.
What hammock did you use on this trip?
The one I made, it's a like 11 foot. Real similar to like an Eno or like a Grand Trunk. And I did. Oh, now that you asked me, it's going to be hard to figure out. Trying to remember the insulation I used in my top quilt and bottom quilt, but it was so many inches. It wasn't Prima Loft. It was something similar to it, but it was so many inches. Rated it to so many degrees, and just sewed it and used Eno's newer straps that don't have the stretch in them to hang it, because that was kind of easy, simple. They already have the rings in them. So yeah, it was all my homemade stuff. I mean, I guess I started my hammock camping, with their one link system when they came out with that years ago. And I know they're now doing a top quilt, underquilt, and different flavors of that in temperature ratings. But I just kind of did the math and said, you know what, I can sew one just as warm for half the money. You start looking at really good stuff. You look at an underquilt, a good down winter underquilt. You start talking $250+ and same for top quilt. You're walking out with a very high end um, sleep system. But it's handmade and it's really high end quality down. So I mean, you are getting what you pay for. Um, but if you can sew it yourself and purchase the down a little bit at a time, and that's what I did. I made one with down and just kind of grabbed a couple ounces at a time because it was a little expensive, and just all right. Well, now I got enough down, and here we go. And ended up kind of buying it all in the summertime when I knew I didn't need it. I just to kind of acquire it, 3-4 ounces here and there, and then made my top and bottom quilt with it.
What's your future plans? Anything to do another big trip like this, another river somewhere?
I'd like to do the Northeast Cape Fear. That's about 171 miles. Well, Riverkeeper and I talked about if we can do the Northeast, the Black, which is about 100, and the South River, which is kind of heading out 40 west, then we would have paddled the major drainage of the Cape Fear River. We would have done the Northeast Cape Fear, the Black, and then the South, and that would be the Cape Fear River Basin. So I think the next one would be the Northeast Cape Fear because that'd be the next longest one. The Black River at 100 miles, you could squeeze it in. You could probably do it in 3 days. You can enjoy it in 5. Just without going out like a death march, just paddle, paddle, paddle. But I think that's what I'd like to do Northeast Cape Fear next. And just kind of start checking that block of doing the whole basin. A customer of mine's been interested in doing the Noose. He grew up in Rocky Point, and family has a house in Little Washington. And kind of his bucket list is he'd like to kind of go from there, take the Noose from there to Little Washington and kind of end up at his kind of family's cottage there. So that's kind of another one. Well, that's hinging on him being able to do it. He's approached me a couple times on doing that trip, and I said, call me when you're ready. He just hadn't called me yet.
Cool.
And get back to the mountains too. I haven't paddled a mountain river in a long time.
Come on up. We'll take.
I love paddling the coast, but sometimes just getting on a mountain river paddling is refreshing.
Well, I want to do the. I've been working on logistically and planning the Yadkin River for this summer to do from North Wilkesboro at the tailwaters, which is kind of basically the start, down to where the Yadkin is dammed up in several areas, and the first lake is High Rock Lake, and I want to do that section. It's about 113 miles. So that's what I've been working on. But again, like the Cape Fear, you're really limited on camping unless you go out and trespass and that kind of thing. The camping publicly or privately, you have real limited. I think there's only like 1 or 2 places on that 100+ mile section of the river.
I mean, I was surprised that we just asked politely how many people said, sure, that sounds like it's a really cool trip. You can stay on my land. Not assuming you can do it, but just physically asking that landowner, may I? There was no real hesitation. It was like, sure, when you coming?
Yeah. And that's what I'm doing right now is working on setting up campsites and reaching out through, I'm using the Yadkin River Keeper and reaching out to them and saying, hey, can you help connect me with landowners? And then just call them up on the phone and say, hey, look, I'll leave it just like I find it or better. Can I come and stay? And so far, everybody's been, yeah, absolutely. No problem.
Yeah, I think a lot of those people in those situations find where people have camped and they get a little frustrated. Like, don't they know it's a private property? But when you ask permission, when you respect the fact that it is their private property and you find out who they are and physically ask them permission, they say yes because it's appreciative. Like, you respect the fact that that's my land. I respect the fact that you're asking me permission to, and I'm going to say yes. And I think it's kind of a two-way street, like, I don't know if I want to wake up in the morning and find someone sleeping in my backyard. If they needed to and they asked me, sure, why not?
All right, now I got one question for you. I don't think we've touched on this, but a couple years ago I was doing a trip and with another guy, and we ended up running into a little issue. We didn't get as far along the river as we wanted to, and we ended up just knocking on a lady's door, and she was super friendly. Yeah, come, you can spend the night. Whatever you need to do, we'll fix you up. But it got me thinking about a what if, because we were on a section of the river where there was no cell access. We had no way of we had no way of getting a hold of somebody. If we would have truly had a problem, what would we have done? Did you guys carry like a GPS beacon or, one of the spots or any of those things to?
We didn't. Should we have? Probably, yeah. But I think the amount of population along the river, we may have had spotty signals or weak signals, but we never had no signal. And if we did, 5 minutes later, someone's phone would beep there back into a signal. But yeah, I mean, if we could kind of go back and like, what would I do different? I think, yeah, maybe like one of those little spot beacons would have been smart. If something did go wrong, all I do is press the button, sit there, wait for help. That probably in hindsight would have been smart to bring. And I think by then we had laid on, we knew where we were going every night. And we knew there were people that were going to be popping by. I mean, every time someone said we could sleep there, they always popped by to say hello. Whether it was that evening when we pulled there in the morning before we left, they just wanted to come by and see how we were doing. They wanted to say hey and kind of pick our brains a little bit of what we'd seen so far and what we planned on doing. So I think for doing, 8 days on the river, we physically spoke to a human being every night and or morning. So we had that reliability of having something did go wrong or someone wasn't feeling well. We had that ability to be like, hey, can you run him over to the doctor real quick to have him checked out, which never happened. But I think, yeah, having a backup plan like that. And if we were somewhere else in the middle of nowhere, knowing there wasn't anybody around to help, yeah, bringing one of those spot meters or, a GPS beacon would be wise to have with you. We didn't, but
do you have
in hindsight, we probably should have.
Do you have a particular brand or that you would like?
I hear a lot of great Spot is really, I hear a lot of great things with that Spot. So if I had to get one, I think I'd go with that. I mean, I also have my amateur radio license. So with a radio, I can hit repeaters. I can, get assistance that way, which I didn't bring along with that trip because I wasn't one then. Some of the new more digital radios have GPS built into them. So, having that Spot would be nice, but, having my amateur radio license, I am afforded the ability to kind of already have that with me. And that's kind of what, during hurricanes and all that, that's kind of what the ham community does. They kind of go into, they help the county and the city with, passing information along when, once everything fails, radio waves still work. So I guess I'm kind of afforded with it, with having my amateur license. I'm kind of afforded with the fact that I could get in a pickle and hit the GPS button so someone knows where I'm at and make a call and say, hey, I'm hurt and this is my GPS signal. Come get me.
And I picked up a two-way radio. And just for that, I want to go get my license. And I want to have that with me. And before I go, I'm going this section of the river. Okay, I need to program these channels into it. So that way, if I run into a problem, all I got to do is grab my radio, key up, and say, hey, help me. I need a little help. Because I carry a Garmin GPS, and I do that just to kind of help. It's got a tracking system, so it'll tell me, hey, I'm doing 3 miles an hour, and so far I've done 4 miles on the river today. So in order to make camp, I need to slow down or speed up or whatever. So I could actually just real easy figure out where I'm at. Then I just need a way to communicate back. So yeah,
it's smart. I mean, I carry a compass too, just because they never run out of batteries.
No.
But yeah, for having that GPS where you can just turn it on and look down and give someone your latitude and longitude within feet of your location is imperative.
All right. So tell me before we go, tell me about your store. Because you got a shop in Wilmington.
Yeah, so we really trying to want to be a full service outfitter. Majority of our stuff with hook, line, and paddle. We do a lot of kayak fishing. And then the other stuff we do are more like 12 and 14 foot recreational sit-ins and sit on tops and tandems. A little bit of paddle boards. Really just where we are, like on the coast. We don't do a lot of camping stuff. Just because we don't have the foot traffic to have tents and backpacks and stoves and that kind of thing. We have a great outdoor provision company here in town. They're able to facilitate that for those people. So we really just focus on paddle sports. Just try to excel at one thing and not try to have our fingers in everything else. So, we deal native liquid logic, wilderness systems, perception. We can get Dagger. If someone's interested in canoes, we can then lean on Mad River. They're kind of through wilderness systems. Mad River canoes, we're able to get them if need be. But core is native wilderness for sure for the fishing side of the house. Liquid logic for the recreational 12-foot sit on tops. And then perception and wilderness systems for that recreational sit inside. So, a good 12-foot like Pungo or the new Joyride from Perception, perfectly fine for doing an overnight or somewhere or a 2-night trip. You don't need a behemoth. You don't need 17-foot Tempest to go crank 30 something miles real fast to get there and set up camp. Just a simple 12-foot sit on or sit on top and just know your limitations, know how far that boat can take you, know how much gear you can take in that boat. And you can go out there and have a good time. It doesn't have to be, crazy, huge, high speed. You don't have to have 15-foot native FX15s to go camping. Just a good quality, at least 12-foot kayak. Then just kind of know your limitations. If you have trouble paddling 5-6 miles a day, don't plan to do a 13-mile trip. You're going to kind of struggle. But get out there and paddle more because that's the only way you're going to build your miles up. It's like running. I mean, the more you paddle, the further you can go.
So, Turtlehead Boy says he likes the hat. So reach out.
We got him at the shop.
Go see him there in Wilmington and pick that up. Also, Josh asked, is there footage from the trip where is there YouTube videos on your trip down the Cape Fear?
No, we didn't shoot any video. The only videos that we have, if you Google a long way to the sea, what our state did was that's the digitized version of the article with all the photos. And then Andrew, the photographer, came back that following October and did kind of like what we're doing now, like a YouTube style video of kind of Q&A between myself, Jeremy, the writer, and Kemp, the river keeper, and our kind of take on that, like what we took away from the trip, like what our kind of role was and what we took away from it. But we don't have any YouTube video of us like, this is us coming through Irwin, or this is our next campsite that we're going to be at, and we picked this spot because of this, that, or the other thing. We didn't do that, which in hindsight, kind of wish we did. But
well, now, Josh,
a long way to the sea, there are some YouTube videos kind of like we're doing now, Shane, just kind of like Q&A, and kind of what we took away from it.
And I looked up one of them, and I put that, Josh, I put that link in the chat. And I'm also right now, I'm on the YouTube, not on the YouTube, on the Our State magazine. And here is the link to the actual article.
Yeah,
So
is it titled "A Long Way to the Sea"?
Yeah, Long Way to the Sea. And
that's the one.
There's several videos, Josh, of there was 4 you guys on the trip, right?
Yeah, correct. Myself, Kemp the River Keeper, Jeremy was the writer, and Andrew was the photo. So if you watch all the videos, you finally get to see what Andrew looks like, because he was the one behind the camera the whole time.
Yeah. So each one of them, there's like, I think there's like 5 or 6, and it just breaks down different aspects of the trip, and it's just kind of a recap of them doing the trip. So I put the link to one of the videos. Go to Our State's YouTube page, and the other ones are in there. And then also, Josh, I put the link to the actual article on Our State's magazine, and I put that up there so you can go and read that article, because I've read it several times. It's actually a pretty good little article, and just a neat idea. I love the whole concept of a source to sea trip on a river. So, any other questions? Yeah. If you got them real fast,
man, it was I dumb lucked into that trip.
Yeah, they did. Were you the outfitter for the trip?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I got all the product. I got the boats coordinated. We did the whole trip. Most of the guys, they wore Ronnie Fishers on the trip. I just wore my green because it was my rescue coat, just in case something happened. Just be able to, if I had to tow somebody or if I need to get towed, we could just switch life jackets. So I kind of wanted to bring more of that like technical rescue type jacket. At least I wore that. But yeah, so it coordinated. So Native was great. They lent me. So I basically used my personal FX15. Kemp used my store demo, and Native lent me 2 of their demos for the Our State crew. Accent paddles out of Minnesota. They make a really cool slider paddle, which goes from 240 to 260, which is a Hero Angler. I kind of felt like, those boats, what we were doing, I prefer just a 250 fixed length. So he kind of, they were kind of custom paddles. I kind of told him what I wanted, and he made it for me and shipped them to me. Astral hooked us up with life jackets for the guys to wear, and just kind of put it together. They kind of leaned on me for, we want to do it. What do we need? Andrew, the photographer, is an incredible mountain climber, and does photography, mountain climbing photography. So he was in that whole like on dry land mode of, tent, stove, sleeping bag. Kemp's an avid camper. My daughter and his daughters, and then the 2 of us go camping all the time whenever chance we get. And Jeremy used it part-time when he was in college, worked at the Whitewater Center in Charlotte, and had done some camping. So we kind of, we kind of gave him like a list of like, you should, tent, sleeping bag, this kind of stuff. And just kind of put the gear together. They kind of leaned on me for the boats. And again, if I had to do it again, if they said, let's run this again 3 years later, see what's changed, I would still grab FX15s. There's a lot of great kayaks on the market. There's a lot of great boats that would do what we did. I just think that FX15 it's the right boat for a big trip with a lot of people, and especially Andrew, that was a photographer. He literally had a Pelican case with a mirror image backup of what he was using daily. Because if one got ruined, he could not stop taking photos. So he had more gear than normal but he kind of had a double fail safe for everything because he was tasked with getting these photos for the magazine. You know, all Jeremy had to do was take notes and compile an article, but Andrew carried the burden of capturing all those awesome images, and so he had to bring a lot of gear with him to make sure if something failed, he could still keep doing his job. And again, it's a great. I mean, I love that boat. I've had an Ultimate since they came out. From a 14.5, the original one, now to the FX15. It's just one of my favorite kayaks of all times, because of its versatility. That what everyone loves about a canoe, but what everyone really loves about a kayak, that low center of gravity and speed. So I'd do it again with the same boat.
All right. Then I got one last question, and we'll shut it down. But looking back, what was the highlight of the trip? What's the one thing when people say, hey, tell me about the trip, the first thing that kind of jumps in your mind that, I remember, I love this part or whatever?
I turned 40 on the last day of the trip. And Andrew got a picture of me on the lower part of the Cape Fear around what we call Island 13. We stopped to watch two bald eagles fly by, but I'm just backlit with this gorgeous orange morning sunrise. And I think it's actually was one of the pictures that made it, but it was like the last day of the trip. Like that was kind of the pinnacle. It was kind of like my I guess my midlife crisis. Like I just cranked 203 miles and I'm ending on my 40th. That's kind of the most memorable. And like I said, Kemp and I have been friends for a long time, so kind of want to have that experience with a good old friend. And I know you do a lot of river camping, but I think when two strangers meet two strangers and you do something like paddle a whole river, I don't think but day 3, Jeremy and Andrew were as tight as Kemp and I were, just kind of in that experience, that bond that you get. And I think that we were all there to kind of share me turning 40, leaving out at 4:30 in the morning on our 8th day just to ride the tide down to Southport to stop the provision company for a shrimp po' boy and a cold beer at the end of the trip. That was probably my favorite part. That was definitely my favorite part.
Cool. Well, man, I greatly appreciate your time. I hope lots of folks.
Oh man, we got to revisit this again sometime.
Yes, absolutely. And if y'all want one of his hats or one of his boats, Chris is located in Wilmington and on hooklinepaddle.com.
Yeah, hooklinepaddle.com. We're at 435 Eastwood Road. So depending on where you're coming from, Raleigh, you'll be coming off of 40, Charlotte area, you'll be coming off 74, 76, but we're pretty easy to get to. We're basically one of two ways to get you'd pass us one of the two ways to get to Wrightsville Beach. So we're pretty easy to find. And cool. We're open Tuesdays through Saturdays, 10 to 6. We're always closed Sunday and Monday.
Good. Maybe we can get some of the groups to okay, Chris, got one more question before I let you go.
Yeah, go for it.
Turtlehead Boys, Josh, the guy that kind of turned me on to you, is coming to the Get Your Paddles Wet trip. I really haven't announced it per se, but I kind of have. I haven't done a video on it, but I put it on Facebook. March the 15th, 16th, and 17th, but really the 16th and 17th. That Saturday and Sunday, we're going to meet in North Myrtle Beach, and we're going to do a short little 20-mile section of the Waccamaw River. It's open to the public, so anybody that wants to come can come. But I've been talking to Chris about it, and I guess Josh with the Turtlehead Boys has put you on the spot. He says, are you coming to Get Your Paddles Wet 2019?
At this moment, I am planning on yes coming, unless something crazy happens at work, because owner of a business with one, by that time, possibly 2 employees, there's no telling what could crop up. But I do want to come. I've talked to Shane got hours on the phone kind of coordinating this. This is the first time I've ever seen him. You
Yeah,
know, it's the first time he's seen me, and I think we've had like tons of conversations about kayak camping and where to go kayaking, and, you know, like what to do, what have you done to make life easier for you, what tricks, like what little tricks do you do, and you know, for me leaving Wilmington, it's only about an hour ride down to where everything's going to happen at. Of course, I'm closed on Sundays. It's just, can I not be here that Saturday beginning of spring? I'm trying to angle it where I can because I love to get out there too and just like I never get to just go hang out with like kayakers. It's always a customer or a lesson or you know something like that. But just to get up with a group of like-minded paddlers and just get 10 miles in, find a place to camp, chill out, have a good time, get up next morning, finish the trip off, workout shuttle, get back to our trucks and go home. I don't get to do that very often. And so I really, really want to try to make this trip. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And again, I've never really done much on the Waccamaw, so that'd kind of be another river to check off my list.
And when I talked to Chris about coming, what we're going to try to do is if he can make it, when we get to camp Saturday night and just kind of everybody gets set up and we're hanging around telling stories, he'll be there for you to pick his brain and check out his gear and just any of that kind of stuff that you want. He's going to kind of have he'll be there for just a little question and answer kind of session if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, if you're new to it or you're doing something or you want to get into whatever, if I can give you a good answer, I will. And I'll be the first person to tell you if I don't know the answer to it. I'm not just gonna try to BS through it and blow smoke. I mean, if I can't answer the question, I'm not gonna answer the question. But if I can and help you, I'd love to do it.
Well, McAllister asked, where's the put-ins and the takeouts? We're going to put in just above the state line in North Carolina, and we're going to take out just below the state line in South Carolina. And I'm still trying to nail down, I'm hoping to try to get down there and do a little paddling on it to nail down exactly where we're going to camp. But I want to try to get about the majority of the trip that Saturday. We're probably going to meet that morning about 9 o'clock and get a bunch of paddling done and then set up camp. So that way we can get up the next Sunday, finish up the trip, and everybody can still have time to make the drives back to wherever they got to go. If you got a long drive, like for me, I'll have about a 3-hour drive back to back home from the beach. So we're going to try to knock most of it out on Saturday and then come back and finish up a little bit on Sunday and make it easy. But yeah, right now Chris is trying to work on getting there, and maybe we can talk him into bringing a few hats to sell.
Yeah, I bring along a few hats if I can make it.
There you go. So, man, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Shane. It was a good time.
If you got any questions, reach out to Chris. He's on Facebook. He's on the web, and let's get a big group together and make camping on the Cape Fear easy.
Yeah. And email, it's hooklineandpaddle@yahoo.com. If anybody wants to shoot me an email, hooklineandpaddle@yahoo.com.
Cool. Chris, I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in, everybody that watched, and we'll definitely be back. We're going to do it again.
Heck yeah.